With Tokyo Game Show just around the corner, I figured now was a good time to make some predictions as to what we might see there. Please note, I did record this a little while in advance, so if any piece of news came out announcing a game that I predicted would be announced here happens in the meantime, that's why. But before we get to my predictions, please tell me yours in the comments. I've never played any Breath of Fire games, a lot of people haven't, actually, but it was one of the most popular JRPGs throughout the 90s to early 2000s. We also know Capcom will be showing up with a host of other games for the event. We know some of the games they'll bring to the event. They range from a couple of Monster Hunter titles to Street Fighter 6 and some others. Now, just because they're at the event doesn't mean they will announce anything new, but considering we do get new games announced at TGS that are more focused on the Japanese market, it wouldn't surprise me if we see some surprises. We also know Breath of Fire scored rather highly on the Capcom surveys that make the rounds every year, so they're just leaving money on the table if they don't capitalize on the stated interest in either brand new Breath of Fire games or remasters of previous entries. Also, it's not like Capcom doesn't honor some of their previous franchises by releasing remastered collections. Look no further than the Mega Man games. Sure, the Blue Bomber hasn't seen much love otherwise in recent years, but when you consider how many remastered collections Capcom put out per year, this prediction is more a case of when and not if. So if it doesn't happen during Tokyo Game Show, it'll happen at some other point, even if it doesn't have a major event attached to it. Also, when you consider JRPGs have started to see a resurgence with both turn-based and action combat, either a remaster of previous Breath of Fire games or a brand new one actually makes sense for Capcom to invest in. We're going to stick with Capcom for a while, since I think they may potentially show off a few other projects. So I'm predicting one that I think is likely to be a long shot here, but one I would love to see, that being Okami 2. The first game was a cult classic from the PS2 days that has since been released on pretty much everything. The original Okami was kind of a commercial flop, at least initially, but word of mouth and subsequent re-releases have helped it to be an entrenched game in history. It had one of the more unique premises and a visually stunning art style. Now that video games are a more mature medium, there's actually more space for this kind of game to finally find its audience. During last year's Game Awards, this game getting announced was one of the biggest surprises we got. While the game admittedly has no stated window for release, it wouldn't surprise me if we see a cinematic trailer that maybe sets up the story. I doubt we're going to see gameplay, since I imagine this game is at least 4 years away, likely making it a cross-generational release, since the 10th gen systems are rumored to be coming out around 2 years from now. I'd personally imagine that isn't the case, and a 2028 or 2029 release window is more likely, but that's beside the point. The second Okami game is more than likely to be a cross-gen game no matter how you slice it, since it's going to have a big budget and be experimental. It's going to want all the sales it can get, so making it exclusive to next-gen systems makes very little sense. But they will also want to take advantage of the best hardware possible, making cross-gen the best solution. But I think we might see a story trailer within the next handful of months. Whether it be at TGS, a PlayStation event, or something else entirely is debatable. But I think something is going to happen. For my third Capcom-related prediction, I think we might see something related to the Devil May Cry franchise. Thanks to the anime from Netflix, the series is now at a better point than it's ever been in. Couple that with straight-up just pure action games like it not flooding the market, and it has real potential to carve out a niche for itself. Now, I have no idea if the rumored remake of the first Devil May Cry will show up here, or if we get DMC6. But I think we're now in a window where a new game makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I don't have a lot to say on the matter, so let's move along to another company. This is a prediction I don't have a lot of confidence in, admittedly, but I do think we'll prove right at some stage within the next year or so. A few years ago, at this point in time, we heard news of a Dead or Alive reboot, which coincided with a supposed Ninja Gaiden reboot. The Ninja Gaiden project did bear fruit recently, as we got major remasters for the franchise, along with a couple of spin-offs and a brand new release as well. So I would argue we will get that new Dead or Alive fighting game. I feel the need to specify fighting game because we are in an endless loop of Dead or Alive Extreme titles dropping. Fighting games are in a better place than they were when Dead or Alive 6 dropped, and it feels a little odd to me for Koei Tecmo to show up with only 3 games, those being Nioh 3, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and Ninja Gaiden 4. Maybe they announce something, maybe they don't. But I think something is in the pipe for Dead or Alive in the near future. Moving on. We know Bandai Namco is going to exhibit a lot of games during the event, with Digimon Story Time Stranger being one of them, a game I've extensively covered on this channel. The review for the game will go up as soon as I am able to get it done. Since I didn't get a review copy, I'll have to wait for my pre-order to go live on October 2nd. However, since I'll be attending a friend's wedding not too long afterwards, a review will get delayed just a little bit. But hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss that when it goes live, along with any other Digimon game I cover in future. But I predict we're going to see them show off the first wave of DLC for the game, since that may include some story content along with brand new Digimon, which would just be a nice way to get a few more pre-orders from people. I do have a few more admittedly long-shot predictions related to Bandai Namco though, so let's go through them. I think there's a very slim chance we get a teaser trailer for Tekken 8. Since Bandai is at the event anyway, it'd make sense. They may or may not bring Tekken 8 to showcase the new character, whose name I cannot pronounce properly. So have a picture of her instead. We know she's slated for a winter release date, so that could mean she's just a few weeks away from release after TGS. So, showing off some of her gameplay would make a lot of sense. But, just like we had a teaser for Season 2 when Clive dropped, I think when the new character finally gets a gameplay and release trailer, we'll get a teaser for Tekken 8 Season 3. I'll be dropping a predictions video for Season 3 really soon, so again, subscribe if that interests you. I don't think that's one of my likelier predictions though. This next one I'm about to go into is also a long shot, but I think it's worth mentioning. Recently I made a video predicting Tales of the Abyss would be the next remastered project for the Tales of series. Namco have also been upfront regarding the fact we're going to see the 30th anniversary continue into 2026, so I think that may indicate they will announce something for the early portion of next year at some point pretty soon. What better way to do so than announce the next remastered project? I think the next Tales of title is going to be another remaster, and the soonest we hear anything about a brand new title will be sometime around this time next year, maybe a little bit sooner. If you want to know why I think it'll be Tales of the Abyss though, you'll just have to watch that video after this one. But I think maybe we see the next remaster during TGS if it ends up releasing sometime in the January through March window, since that would just be enough time to start the marketing buzz, while also giving the Tales of Xillia remaster, which is out at the end of next month, enough time to gain traction. I think, however, it's more probable the next remaster gets saved for one of the big three's upcoming events. We'll just have to wait and see though. Admittedly, I predicted this last year, but I do honestly think we'll see remasters for both SMT4 titles at some point in time. Atlus knows there's a renewed interest in the series, thanks to things like Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance and Raidou Remastered. Atlus also loves something called money, and they can't currently profit from either of the two SMT4 titles, which are still locked in 3DS purgatory. So yet again, this is another one of those cases where it'll happen at some point, though I will admit something like a Nintendo Direct or Partner Showcase would make the most sense for this particular release. Whether it be split up like Raidou Remastered will be, or it comes out as a collection bundled together is up for debate. I think it's more of a case of how much work is Atlus willing to put in. If they're doing the deluxe remaster route like Raidou Remastered, then I could 100% see them splitting up the SMT for Duology. Now if they're just doing a straight up port job, that's where I see us getting both at the same time. But I think TGS might be a good time to announce this, especially if it ends up being multi-platform, since a lot of people have heard great things about both games, but may not have been able to experience them thanks to not owning a 3DS. We're going to stick with Atlus for a while though. This one, I will admit, is a long shot to happen here, but it's one I think could conceivably happen within the next calendar year. Specifically, the announcement for Devil Summoner 2 Raidou Kuzunoha vs King Abaddon. I know this was a title a lot of people want to see return, especially after they got the chance to play the first Raidou game. So it makes sense for Atlus to announce this remaster sooner rather than later. By announcing it at Tokyo Game Show, they really will assuage a lot of potential worry Atlus fans might have regarding the second game ever getting remastered. For those in the know, it's clear the first remaster did well enough to greenlight the remaster for the second game. Also, given Atlus now have the resources to just do it, the time between the first game and the second getting remastered is going to be a minuscule wait. I could see Atlus announcing it here if they intend to release the second game sometime in the spring. Again, this is a case of the game will come out at some stage. It's just a matter of when. We also know the team behind Raidou Remastered want to revisit the character and the setting for a third game, so I think there's potential they hold off on announcing the second remaster until they have at least the story trailer for the third entry. We're going to stick with Atlus and remasters with this next prediction. I think there is a good chance we see the Digital Devil Saga duology of games get the remastered treatment. I'm personally hoping Atlus will go the route of a deluxe remaster in the vein of Raidou Remastered, since that opens the door for fewer complaints and gives these games the best chance of shining. Why do I think we'll see the Digital Devil Saga games though? Mostly it comes down to Atlus fans requesting them so heavily in the early surveys, pretty much ensuring we get them at some point. Don't believe me? Look at the past survey results. Every top-ranking game has been remastered or remade already, or is likely to get that treatment in the future. TGS is also the perfect time to announce something like this, since it's not too heavily tied to one console despite being a PS2 exclusive. Also, unlike the Raidou games, these two titles were more commercially successful at launch, making the remasters more of a sure thing when they do eventually come. Also, while they may be beloved games, they aren't so mainstream that revealing them during either a PlayStation or Nintendo event is likely to lead to additional sales. But when do you think Atlus will finally unveil the Digital Devil Saga games? Let me know in the comments. Again, we're sticking with Atlus for a bit. We're also still stuck on remasters. I think this one is more likely to happen at a Nintendo Partner Showcase, but I also would not be all that surprised if TGS ends up being where we get this remaster. I think Atlus is going to put out a remaster for the Persona Q games. Again, this is another thing I predicted last year, and I'm more sure we hear about these sometime in the next year or so. Just like the SMT4 duology, these two games are stuck in 3DS purgatory. Remastering them for other systems is likely to be a nightmare though, when you consider how heavily they relied on the dual-screen nature of the DS systems. However, just like the previous Atlus games I've mentioned in this video, they remain near the top of the leaderboard when it comes to games Atlus fans want remasters or sequels to. So it's a matter of when, not if. The reason I think they end up being revealed during a Nintendo Partner Showcase comes down to them being so heavily tied to the 3DS systems. But of all of the remasters I've mentioned thus far, I think they have the greatest shot at performing the best, given Persona, even when it's a spin-off, tends to do numbers for Atlus, which further encourages them to do more and get more experimental. At this point, a remaster of these is inevitable. Who knows? We might even see a Q3 launch when Persona 6 finally releases. That's a teaser for later in the video, by the way. I'm very confident at least part of this prediction is going to end up coming true. I think we could see Persona 4 Revival get a gameplay drop at minimum, and possibly a release date dropping as well. A lot of people commented the gameplay revealed during the Xbox Summer Showcase was incredibly crusty looking. I don't feel like it was all that bad. But what do I know? but I feel like the announcement during the showcase was more Atlus saying, "Get off me, here's your game, you brats." I think their intention was to show it off fully during Tokyo Game Show, but were forced to show their hand thanks to the leaks and people getting impatient. But a gameplay reveal around now would make a crap ton of sense, since the game is probably out sometime next year, with maybe the year after at a push. I think 2026 is likelier when you consider they could have waited if the game is much further out than that. Also consider this, Atlus has pretty much made Persona a yearly franchise at this stage, with us always getting some small-scale project at minimum, and maybe a larger scale one on top of that. This year was a lot quieter, because they blew their load last year with Persona 3 Reload, Unicorn Overlord, SMT5 Vengeance, and Metaphor ReFantazio. So next year is probably going to be at least a moderate year for releases. I just think it makes the most sense for them to release Persona 4 Revival sooner rather than later, since we know they've had Persona 6 in the oven for a very long time at this stage. I even have a prediction as to when we might see Persona 4 Revival release, March 10th specifically. Think about it, it would release in the middle of the week. Even though new game releases tend to come out on a Thursday, this wouldn't be all that big of a deal. Couple that with the early stages of next year being prime real estate to release something, as you'll avoid things like Grand Theft Auto 6 and other huge games that'll come out later in the year, and it just makes sense to put it out then. Now I know Atlus have said it's a game for the fiscal year of 2027, which for Sega, Atlus's parent company, starts in April and ends in March. But I'd say there is some wiggle room, given game development is fluid, but I would say sometime in the spring through fall is fair game for Persona 4 Revival to release. And I think the sooner it's out, the better for Atlus, since they did reveal Persona 4 Revival is a 2027 fiscal year release. And there will supposedly be 3 other major titles from their parent company releasing in the next fiscal year. Either way, it is a safe bet to make that we will at minimum get a trailer for Persona 4 Revival here, and I think it's a moderately safe bet we'll see the release date here as well, which brings me on to the final Atlus-related prediction. I won't spend too much time on this prediction, given I'm just that confident about it, and I think we're more likely getting it revealed at another event that could happen around the same time. I very much doubt we get any news related to Persona 6 during Tokyo Game Show. Would it be awesome? Yeah, but it's incredibly doubtful. I'm going to kind of lump this into one set of predictions. We know PlayStation is going to have a presence during TGS this year to showcase something related to Astro Bot, Ghost of Yotai, and Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls. We also have rumors that PlayStation will have a showcase or state of play earlier in the month. So let's get to the PlayStation predictions. We know Marvel Tokon is going to have a beta earlier in the month, and the game is slated to release next year. Usually when a game has a beta test that's open to some members of the public, or large swathes of them in the case of open betas, then it's close to release, usually within months. I also think Marvel Tokon will come out relatively early next year, so this particular prediction is going to be twofold. I think we likely hear some news of a second Marvel Tokon beta, probably an open one this time around, which I think could happen as soon as December. I also think we may hear when the game is slated for release, since I imagine it'll be a Q1 to Q2 release. I don't have a specific release date in mind for this, so that's all you'll get from me regarding that for now. Since they specifically mentioned Astro Bot being there, I think we likely hear news about more Astro Bot DLC and potentially an Astro Bot sequel. We know Sony was incredibly happy with the sales figures for Astro Bot last year, so a sequel will have been greenlit. We've also had some DLC levels as well, which is pretty cool, so I think we could see more DLC and a sequel shown off. But that's not my final prediction for PlayStation. Let's cover that really quickly. It has long been rumored we're going to get a remake for The Legend of Dragoon. I think that is probably going to happen at some stage, since people have wanted a remake at least as far back as the PlayStation 3. Now that systems are significantly more powerful and games of this style are starting to return in popularity, it wouldn't be all that surprising if we got a remake for The Legend of Dragoon. The game seemingly didn't do all that well back in the day, but I chalk that up to JRPGs being a dime a dozen for the PS1, along with the fact the game came out so close to when the PS2 did, that it just didn't have the audience base it otherwise should have. Had it come out as a PS2 exclusive and pushed what the early cycle for that console was capable of, I think it'd have been one of the best-selling games ever, and we'd have gotten sequels through the PS3 and 4 era. But that isn't the timeline we live in. Instead, the game did at least okay financially and became a cult classic in the process. But I think either at an upcoming PlayStation event or during Tokyo Game Show, we might see this remake come to fruition. I think this next prediction is more than likely to happen. While NIS America haven't explicitly stated they will be at TGS, they typically do show up in some form or another, with East 10 Proud Nordics slated for a early release sometime next year on Switch 2 and PC. It just makes sense for it to also get a PS5 port. Given we're now in a gaming landscape where exclusivity is rather prohibitive for developers and publishers, also when you consider the original release also works on PS5 and you start to see it makes very little sense for Proud Nordics to not also release on additional systems. Even if we don't see it get announced during TGS, it makes too much sense for it to not happen at some point. I know a lot of people have stated they held off on picking up the original release of East 10 because they want to experience the more definitive edition of the game. Maybe we get the announcement here, maybe we don't. Maybe we get a future release revealed sometime after the launch of Proud Nordics for Switch 2 and PC. We'll just have to wait and see. A while back, Nihon Falcom announced they were working on a Tokyo Xanadu sequel, and it would take place in Kyoto. Otherwise, we haven't heard any details on the game whatsoever. As of right now, there probably isn't a better spot for Falcom to actually reveal this game. While they could do so during a shareholders meeting, that wouldn't exactly lead to gameplay being shown to the public. I also think it's unlikely this game would get shown off at another event, since it wouldn't be as big a deal as a brand new East game, nor a new Trails game, meaning a lower chance it shows up at one of those events. Given Falcom releases at least one game per year, I think more than likely the Tokyo Xanadu sequel is the game for next year. Also, given the franchise is nowhere near as popular in the West as it is in Japan, and I doubt it gets a same-day release in the West, like Trails in the Sky Remake is getting. But I also feel like sooner rather than later is the best course of action for Falcom with this game, especially if they end up releasing multiple new games next year, which is not outside the realm of possibility. Given Kai no Kiseki, otherwise known as Trails Beyond the Horizon, does end on a cliffhanger, so it wouldn't surprise me if Falcom were to release this Xanadu project in the early part of the year and release the sequel to Kai no Kiseki around September, when their biggest hitters tend to release. I would have predicted the sequel to Beyond the Horizon getting revealed here, but I imagine if that happens, we see it at the shareholders meeting in a few months. So those were my 16 predictions for Tokyo Game Show 2025. If you're curious, you can check out my predictions from previous years, or why I think Tales of the Abyss is the next Tales of Remastered project. And until next time, keep blazing that trail.